I got an echo then. I think we're good. Okay. All right. So let me back it up so you can see everyone. Maybe not. Do I'll just go. Okay. So I'm glad to be able to meet with you concerning the IPG, because I feel like this is the point where we are now, and we're eager to do more with the administrators at the school level. Mm-hmm. We've done a lot of prep work. They are on board. They've been encouraging teachers, but now is the time to get into classrooms. And teachers respect their principals so much and want to do the best job they can, that I feel like they will respond well. We've introduced the IPG to all the teachers in various ways. We did a summer session with teachers during our district-wide PD, and we have talked about the IPG with every teacher at every PLC, grades K through 2 as well. So we have introduced it to them and talked about it. I feel like their comfort level is good in that they understand it, and they understand that we are all learning together, including their school administrators. So I think we're ready for the next step. And so we just need some guidance as to how to do that. I'm interested in learning more about the process that we might follow, down to what that looks like going into classroom, the number of minutes, the number of people, all of that. We're open.
So it sounds like two big things. One, that you've already grounded your vision for foundational skills, and the IPG was an integral part of that kind of vision setting. You've got everybody on board. I know that you and Mandy have been going into classrooms and doing some observations, but now you're ready to pull in principals and using the IPG and the walks that way to kind of help bring your school administrators in on some of those classroom visits, and ready to start providing feedback to teachers.
Yes.
Too. So I think that's the first thing, is really when we think about the IPG, is thinking about the purpose, because it can be used for multiple purposes. First, you've already used it for vision setting, kind of helping to ground some of those things that you believe to be true, and what you expect to see in classrooms every day. Another way that it can be used, as you think through about what is your purpose, and you can use it in multiple ways through the same walk. So just looking at it through different lenses. So one might be a mirror that reflects the effectiveness of the support. So it's more, you're going to use the data, you're going to be reflective about the support that you've given, that teachers have received, and kind of thinking about the implementation part of that. So it's a reflection of the implementation. Another way, which I hear you bringing up, is kind of that filter or lens that you're using when you are looking at classrooms and helping principals look at classrooms as to provide specific feedback to teachers through the lens of that IPG tool. And then the other one that I definitely heard you say was a purpose, was a tool to help build capacity of your principals, was one of the main purposes, maybe in this particular and kind of where you were thinking. Did any of the others are you feeling like you want to focus in on one specific, or do you see using that in multiple ways now? Or we may want to consider too, a consideration would be thinking about this long-term and scaling. Does it make sense to do one before you really focus on a purpose for one of the others? So that could be something too that you think about.
Initially, I'm thinking all of them, because, as you said, we have set our vision as to this is what's important. Mandy and I are even discussing, as we observe lessons, comparing that to IPG and the different components and seeing what is there. So I think that, as well as teachers being able to use it to reflect on their instruction, and also capacity building for principals too. So I do think all of that together would be our total purpose.
Okay. So it may be, as we get into the nitty gritty of some of the logistics, there may be some different structures that you want to think about depending on what purpose you're using it for. And I think it's also important to know too, just thinking about the fact that you didn't jump straight into using IPG and giving feedback to teachers. There's been a lot of work that's come before that. So I think that that's something that that definitely sets you up for being ready to give specific. We don't want to give feedback to teachers before we're confident that we've set them up and given them lots of support, which you guys have definitely.
Right.
You have a lot of things that you built up to this point in that space. So thinking about all those different lanes for the purpose, I think, and we can kind of think through this, each one differently, or if you see where some overlap too, we can do that too. So I think first, just thinking about what would success look like. So let's just get down to the walk itself. Who do you see participating?
The building principal, the director of learning from here in the office, assistant principal, and maybe learning leader.
Okay. And I guess the next question would where? So all schools.
Mm-hmm.
You're hoping to hit all schools. You're small enough to where you can.
Yes, each of the 5 elementary schools.
And then the next question would be, how often would this realistically be able to take place in a way that's going to.
My light went out. Sorry.
Yes. I thought you were just waving, trying to get her attention for a minute. You can speak up anytime, by the way. Yes, what are we capable of doing? I think at least once a week at a school. That might be the most we can do at the initial start of it. And then afterward, principals may do more within their own group. Pam and I will go with the school group, but after that, they may choose to do more of them on their own. So that might be something we do is initially start with them and then allow them to expand out. I'm just thinking.
Yeah. So that would be a way to scale to first start. So you're thinking that the district walk one school per week and kind of go on a rotating basis.
Possibly.
Depending
on logistically how many classrooms we could get into in that one walkthrough.
Mm-hmm.
I would think we'd want to hit one of each grade level, maybe 2 or 3, just to get a good representation of what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm curious in knowing what amount of time we might stay that we'd be able to see enough, gather enough information from each classroom, and then what data we can then follow up with afterwards. So I
think timing, and Mandy, you might also be able to note, because you're going to need to be really strategic in timing, right? It's when you want to capture when they're doing this particular lesson. In schools, are they generally teaching foundational skills at the same time? Is there a short block of time where they're all teaching foundational skills?
It varies depending on the grade level, and depending on the school as well. Some schools, like for instance, one school, everybody teaches K through 2nd, teaches it from 8 to 9:30, and that just is that block of time. Now other schools are more, they're varied, some will be at 8 and some will be at 10, some might even be in the afternoon, depending on, their typical schedule and related arts, planning, that kind of thing. So, sometimes it might be happening at the same time, but then other times it might be scattered throughout the day. So.
And we found that across the district, a lot of them do have their skills instruction first thing in the morning, about 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
that too, which has been tricky because, with I think 8 of the 15 are at 8 o'clock. So, which is a good thing if you're trying to get in to see several classrooms. But when you're wanting to focus on one classroom at a time, it takes a little bit longer. So,
and just thinking more about that, if we did do one a week, that would put one school 5 weeks away from getting there, and I would hate to do that. So we might be more frequent in the beginning to get in more schools.
So is your first goal to help build principal capacity before you give specific feedback, maybe?
Yes.
So thinking about the purpose.
Yes, that would be the first
Mm-hmm.
goal, because we do want to build their capacity and them learn as we progress. Right now, Mandy and I are able to, as we video, give feedback to teachers,
Mm-hmm.
so they aren't on hold. They are getting feedback, but I would like to build the principal capacity, both within the curriculum itself and the walkthrough process, so that they could continue to do that on their own.
So would it be an option to have principals travel to other schools with the team?
It would be.
That might increase
Yes.
so you don't have that 5-week window.
Yes. I like that. That would also give them a glimpse into different
Mm-hmm.
schools and instruction and the culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea.
Just to increase the frequency that they're getting that. And I think I heard you also say that you still plan, because you and Mandy are deeper in this and feel comfortable giving feedback, that you guys would be the ones giving some feedback to teachers at this point.
Yes.
Principals would not be giving feedback at this point. They would just be part of the kind of learning process until.
Well, I kind of see it. It's twofold. Through the coaching process, we are getting feedback, but I would like principals to give feedback as well. So both.
So part of that also building just empowering them to be able to, and through those debriefs that you have and those conversations that you have, to give them maybe some look-fors that they can kind of take that in smaller chunks. My assumption too is you've got principals who are coming into this with varying levels of background and foundational skills. So some are going to be feel more comfortable, whereas others are going to be. So have you thought about kind of supporting those that maybe aren't as strong in this area?
We have encouraged them to attend training as much as possible, to talk with teachers as much as possible. The majority of our principals do not come from an elementary background. One does, and she's new, but the rest do not necessarily. So it is a process in when helping them to understand the research, the curriculum, all of that. So I think that's just something maybe, and as you get into it, to kind of see who picks it up more quickly, or I think you'd mentioned before you had some maybe guiding questions that you had thought about with IPG that you could give to principals. And we did give those out at our academy over the summer. So they have those questions, guiding questions really for each of the core actions.
I think that would be another question would be, are you envisioning using all the core actions of the IPG, or are you thinking maybe chunking that into focusing on particular core action for the walk or particular indicators for the walk as you're helping to build their capacity, or are you thinking the whole thing?
What is your thought on that? We've discussed that, and we've been able, with the lessons that we have observed so far, to look at all three actions within a overview, really, to say, to look at materials and to look at instruction and look at student engagement in a broad scope. But what are your thoughts about that?
I think when we think about the IPG for knowledge building, we talk about that one as being kind of we build. So you have to focus on materials first before you can focus on correction 2, before you can focus on correction 3. Foundational skills might be a little bit different. We haven't I don't know that there's a right or wrong approach. So I think it's just thinking strategically through what do you feel like. I think going back to the purpose. So your initial purpose is to build capacity of your principals. Whereas, and then thinking about the people on your team, you'll be there.
Come in.
Oh, y'all are twins.
We are.
We're videotaping our conversation. Come on in, join us. We're talking about the IPG, and we'd like your input as well. And
Yeah, I think we were just discussing strategy as far as I think we've settled on the first priority goal is to help build capacity in your building leaders so that they can have an opportunity to go in, observe, start to empower them to give some feedback specific and using the tool to do that. So our question was, would it be more beneficial to kind of look at the tool and all the core actions in its totality, or to take it in maybe having just look at one particular section at a time? So I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's maybe thinking about your purpose. I think going back to the purpose of this building leader capacity piece. However, I think you've also got, if Penny, you're going to be with them and you're very comfortable with all the core actions, you still have the opportunity for you to maybe collect data on all the core actions. So you could potentially, think about that, and just each person on the team might be responsible for something different.
okay, so now that you've said that, it's kind of cleared a little bit in my mind. Our previous experience with observing a total lesson. Again, for instance, Mandy and I observed a lesson this week where we saw the entire lesson, and this was a first grade classroom. And afterward, we were able to think about each of the core actions, starting with instructional materials. We know that she used the foundational skills units. And so we looked at that, and we kind of used our lesson plan as a guide to see that all the major components were intact. And so that was really important to us to know that she followed the script to the degree that all the components were addressed and didn't leave anything out. In this particular lesson, the language part was missing. And so we were able to talk about that, in that she hit it to some degree, but not to the degree that it needed to be covered for the students to truly understand nouns and plural nouns and so forth. So I think that is a good starting point with principals to look at instructional materials, that first core action, because it is crucial to us that each teacher follow the script to the degree that it has integrity. So I think that would be a good starting point for principals to maybe even take the curriculum themselves and be able to look as a guide as the teacher goes through to see that all the major components are there. What do you think?
I think so too. And I think if we start small like that with them, looking at each core area, and then move maybe toward later in the year, we could do the entire IPG.
Yes.
But let's start off with chunking it in your core pieces that you have. So
Exactly. Another example is that we went into a kindergarten classroom. Again, we had the curriculum lesson to guide us as the teacher was teaching. We were able to see that she did hit every part, every component that was crucial to those kids understanding that skill and applying it throughout the lesson. And so for us to say to this teacher, you taught this lesson with integrity, and we're so proud of that you are making sure you do that is what we need to happen for student outcomes. And then with the first grade teacher, as Mandy follows up in her coaching session, can help her to reflect on the missing piece and what that might look like for kids, and to be cognizant of following the script to the degree that they have what they need. So I think that would be a good place. What about you, Mandy? What are you thinking?
I think it would be kind of overwhelming. I think you have a good point in saying that, you know, we've used it. We've been into classrooms. We have some experience with it. And I think giving them that opportunity to build that capacity within that one area would be beneficial. I know for me, just starting out, that would help me if I didn't have any understanding. So I agree. I think that's a good point, Penny. And I think that's a good route.
Okay.
Well, I think you guys have that additional layer of Mandy being able to circle back in and giving some very specific,
Right.
very detailed, getting to some of those granular things that you really have a good grasp in the content knowledge and understanding of what that should look like. Where, so you mentioned some of your principals don't have that, so they're going to not feel as comfortable. And so I think part of this process too, as you're thinking about the feedback that principals give, may be a little different for a while than the level of feedback that they'll get from you and Mandy too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that
Yes.
Definitely.
right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of, as you set up your purpose with your administrators, to let them know that the expectation is for them not to give that level of feedback yet, but to empower them to give curriculum. They can look at the
Yes.
curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
You even mentioned earlier how you've learned a lot about the curriculum just kind of digging in there, and this will give them an
Yes.
opportunity to do that.
Yes, I think they would be comfortable with noting that all the components are there and not, and then just giving feedback to help the teacher reflect as to why that was happened the way it did. Was it intentional, or just something that they left out because of planning or whatever it is, to help them to reflect, to get to the place where they do include all those components. I think principals would be comfortable with that feedback.
I think they will. And in our PLC, as we have building understanding on the IPG itself, looking at the entire IPG, but then using a section at a time or a core action at a time, then I think that will help them. But they will have the big picture because of the PLC training that we've had and will continue to have, in our principal meetings. So I think that will help them as well.
I think it does. Yeah, I think that's an important, I like that component of them understanding the big picture and how all these other things are going to fit into that, but they're not expected at this point to be really deep in that. But what they'll hear is in your debriefs, they'll hear you talk the talk and talk, so they'll start to pick up on some things. And I think as you go through the plan, as you plan this out and scale, think about scaling this over time, and that I think is part of the thinking through the planning process, is when you feel ready to move on to the next, or what that kind of looks like long term.
Yeah. So that it's received in its entirety by the end of the year. Yeah, it's a growing process.
Right. And I think we'll set out that timeline of kind of, as you and Mandy are working in the classes, when do we need to put that expectation that we'll move into the second core action and then to the third. So we'll just plan that out and put it on the calendar to pace it and make sure that we're ready. I think the teachers are ready, with all the training you've had with them, and the meetings feedback has been very positive. So I think when they see a principal come in and use that same thing, it's going to be a positive impact on them as well, because the principal is going to show that they are involved in what they're doing and they believe in it and they're supporting them. So I think it's really going to help the morale of the teachers as well, just knowing that they're involved in it and they're learning too, just like they are.
Yes, and we're to the point where we want that momentum to continue.
Yes.
We're into September now. All of the teachers have been using the foundational skills units, so they're grounded in that. Some are moving into Unit 2 already, and so I think we're ready for that. We talked about what that group would look like in the school. Would be the principal, assistant principal, learning leader, you and myself, and that we would go in and try to hit all of the schools at the beginning, and even have some principals visit other schools too, so we can mix it up. But I think it's important within the next few weeks that we plan to get into all the schools and get it started. And then they could do more on their own, of course, but we could continue to lead the process as we go
And
through.
I think starting with the individual schools and just that principal first, while they wrap their head around it, and then moving into other principals coming in will make them feel more comfortable as well.
Yeah, be a
Just
next
knowing our
phase.
group. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we talked about that also, helping to increase maybe the frequency that they get to see other and have these conversations, you know, with and to hear the debriefs to see what's happening.
And I'm thinking too, while you're talking about that, we have monthly principal PLCs, and they always bring something to share. I'll send out a note this week. I want you to share. You know, it could be progress in our implementation, or please share out something you saw in a different class. So if I actually specifically ask, share some feedback that you've found or given during an IPG walkthrough, then that's something they can share back with the group, which will be a learning process as well. So we can add that in their share time of our PLC, which will be a great way for them to typically what they bring back and share, they grow from one another. So I think that would be something we could add in.
That's a great idea. It will be ongoing throughout the
Right.
year that you can do that. And also the data collection they can bring as we meet as a group afterward. We'll have that data to collect and discuss, so they could bring that and discuss with the others too. That would be really good growing opportunity.
And just to hear how that's impacting their individual schools and the growth that they're starting to see. And I think that would have a good impact on our PLC
Yes.
as well.
I wonder if you can tap into, you've captured lots and lots of videos too. You could, as you think down, maybe further down, capturing snippets of great examples of teachers doing to be able to show them, you know, and
To show the group, the principals in their meetings.
as
Yeah.
part of their training. You've got access to lots of really great
That's a good
Yes.
idea.
Yes, that would be a good idea.
A snippet of a particular lesson that we want to emphasize. It may be student samples that a good example of, you know, data collection, or maybe an area to grow, or both. So I like
And how does that
idea too.
compare with what they're collecting? You know, I think that's always, if it stirs thought and it stirs those questions in the mind of the principal, then they're going to be able to take that back and look a little bit closer at what they're passing out, you know, and what they're seeing in their building.
Yeah.
So thinking about norming.
And they'll do that on their own without us, you know, if you say, we need to see this, but when they start seeing some exemplars coming in, they're like, ooh, I could see that in my building, you know, how would that look like in this grade level, you know?
Yeah, and then they just naturally start to walk into classrooms on their own and look for these pieces without a formal walkthrough, just a daily observation.
Right.
Okay, so I think you've got the people, talked about some timelines. So I think we started talking about schedules. So it sounds like there may be schools where you could go into multiple classrooms because they're scheduled more throughout the day, whereas some are going to be more just within an hour and a half time frame. So that would limit in that particular school the number of classrooms you could visit. So,
well, our schools, the proximity is so close. I think we should be able to go school to school fairly easy. So it should be easy for us to work out a schedule for that.
just thinking through. And I think part of that too is you brought up how many classrooms would you like to try to visit?
Samples from.
So, what do you feel like is a good sample size or a good learning opportunity for the principals for that piece? So, and how long to see the lesson from start to finish? That's, then you're in one classroom for a long time, or seeing snippets you'll see different, especially in those spaces where they're all starting at 8 and going to 9:30. As you move from class to class, you probably see some biological awareness in the
Right.
beginning, and then
Several of the schools, since they do plan together, the teachers plan together, typically you can see the continuation of the lesson as you go around. I've noticed when I'm observing in the classroom, so you could see the different points, and they all have their own spin on it, but they do plan together, so you can kind of see structurally.
True. And if we're focusing on core activity, we should be able to see the instructional materials in every classroom that we go into at this onset.
Right.
So I think that will work. I think that will work. Be it 5 to 7, 8 minutes a classroom. We will be able to see what instructional materials they're using.
And we may have to change that as we go through the different core actions, just depending on.
Go through the year.
Mhm.
Yes.
But it would be a great start. It would be a starting point.
And so something I'm thinking would be valuable would be for the principals to ask teachers to give them the time that they teach the hour of skills, foundational skills units, and the times that they tentatively plan on doing the sums first activities. If each of the teachers would give that to the principals, then they would have it to share with us so we could set up our schedules.
And I was thinking we may even be able to send out a Google Doc and send the framework that we want, just send it straight to the teachers and let the teachers fill that out for us and share it back. And then it's not, I think sometimes if we send it out and then we're waiting for them to compile it and get it back, it's going to take longer than if we send out a Google form and have the schedules there and have the teachers pencil in their names maybe on the time frames.
We could do that with the units for sure. With foundational skills, they might break it up into 3 different times during the day, transitions or whatever. So that would be a little different in collecting that. And it that would work fine with me. I didn't know if you wanted to go through principles, but for this, we don't particularly have to.
I think we may copy principles, but let the teachers, because it's what I've noticed with their master schedules, when they turn those in, they have a set block, but yet each teacher might arrange that a little bit differently. So
Right.
we're going to be looking at so many different schedules for a
Right.
principal to have to gather and try to send to us. It might be easier for the teacher just to put it down. If we send a block, say this is Castle Heights, and on this block we're going to have the teachers listed, and then we're going to have a place for the time, and we'll put foundational skills and let them fill in where they are on that time frame. And then if we send one out for each school, we should be able to have that back from the teacher. I think we'll get a better response, a faster response.
Okay. We can do it that way.
maybe a little more detail and
Right. Because they're going to have to go ask the teacher,
Right. Well,
you know, exactly what would be your time, and then coming back. But we'll have principals on that. If we do it on a Google form or Google document, we can share with principals as well, so everybody will see it, and it'll be a living, breathing document that if they change their schedule, they can put that on there. Then we would see it.
Right. Okay. I like that.
so you're thinking for this first round when you're really focused on use of materials, kind of a fidelity almost, kind of, are we using it and to what extent are we following that? And I guess your time frames, I heard you say 5, 7, 8 minutes. You can
I would think
decide.
so.
Okay,
Are you
just-
thinking that would work too?
I think that's completely up to how,
We may have to change. We could start with that, and we have to adapt.
I think we go in and we'll learn as we go to see how long it's going to take to really get a good look. I don't know if we could say that on the beginning. I mean, it might be different too for some teachers. You know, I don't know.
Well, ideally, if they are using the foundational skills curriculum, it should be there the entire 60 minutes.
Right.
They may bring in other additional materials, like right here at the beginning of the year. I mean, they may add a strategy or two. Like we saw that yesterday. She had extra time within that 60 minutes, so she brought in whiteboards to have them writing. Very appropriate, but still that was not a long period of time. So we could see clearly that she was using the units. So you should be able to see that.
Yeah, I think you talked about seeing the progression and I think because the materials you're using have all the components. That's one part of correction 1-2 is you want to see that what's the time dedication in the classroom spent on phonological awareness, phonics, fluency. Do we see all of those pieces appropriately kind of divided depending on where they are? What grade level, time of year, what does that look like? And are we seeing that split? And so part of it's, so you're confident in that you've got the pieces, as long as they follow the curriculum, they have all those pieces in there. So now, you're kind of looking at two things, and maybe you do one the first time and then the other one, the next one could be the next step. But first, the kind of that fidelity, are they using it? Are they using it the way it's intended? And then the other kind of gets to pacing, because you may have some teachers that are using it. They've got the hour set, but maybe we're doing phonological awareness, we're doing the phonics, but we're not getting to the fluency, or something's not being left out. So that would go more toward pacing and delivery, kind of in that correction 1, if you're thinking about that particular.
We could also have the principals share the planning for the week of the teachers that we go into, and if we are looking at their plan, their lesson plans, so that we can see what they have planned, and that will give us a good idea with their pacing as well, not just what we pop in and see, but what have you planned each day and how they're putting that in their planning.
For teachers to share the lesson number that they're on, or their entire lesson?
I think they're planning for the day, what they plan for that lesson, that literacy block. Okay. What does that look like in your plans? I know they're following curriculum and they're doing that, but a lot of times you can tell about their pacing and if they're looking at all pieces of that curriculum by looking at their plans that they have written down. You can see, are they leaving a piece out each time as they're planning? What are they doing to prepare for the week as they study and look through and they're writing down what they're doing? I think we should be able to see some of that in their lesson plans.
Okay. So it's an announced visit for the walkthroughs then. Okay.
Well, I think all teachers do lesson plans every day. It wouldn't have to be an announced one. Principals, usually they turn them in like Friday before the next week.
Okay.
We could just glance over those plans just to kind of get an idea of what they're putting in there for their literacy block. What does it look like?
Okay.
Not just when we're in there, but what are they planning to do?
So every teacher turns in their lesson plans at all schools. Okay, great. We could use that.
Most schools, they all turn them into their principals or have them where they can view those plans.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if that could be part of because that's part of your, if we think about the different purposes for your collection to kind of see how it's going district-wide or at a particular school. We think to the capacity building of the principals. If you had those collected to help them know what to look for. So if we want to see all of these components and you're looking at the plans, these are the things that you should be seeing. Or, if you see things that are flags that maybe say, we're not sure if we're devoting enough time to fluency, or you're seeing a teacher maybe leave out pieces. Because if pacing is an issue, then they start to make choices about what they leave in, take out, that kind of thing. It may show up on lesson plan, and it may show, but it also, as you start to do more walks, that'll also just kind of build their capacity to know what they're looking for, what they should see, what they shouldn't see, that kind of thing. Maybe. So thinking about evidence that's collected and that side of it. So I think you've got different, you're walking for different purposes with the tool. So the evidence collected at this point, are you wanting, what kind of evidence are you wanting principals to collect, I guess? Think about all the people on the team. are you wanting them to collect evidence at this point, or is this learning? Okay, so for core action 1, what would they be responsible for collecting?
I think we start with the data collection at the first walkthrough, so that we learn the process and they'll learn through that process. But I think the pieces that we talked about would be what we would discuss, what materials they were using for what period of time, viewing their lesson plan to see if all the components are there and how much time for each that they devoted to. So it would be not only the observation, but the lesson plan that we would collect the data from.
And as they're taking notes on their IPG, I mean, that would be our evidence. And then also in our follow-up conversations, having notes as evidence of.
And I believe that rating, if you're looking at it is a yes, no.
It's just no.
But then you have those boxes built in within the indicator where you see if you observe biological awareness or fluency or phonics or 3, 5 to 7 minutes, you'll see 1 probably. I think those are the only pieces on the actual tool that they collect.
I would like for them to take notes though, when you go in, not just give them a rating, because when you go in 3 or 4, you're not going to be able to remember and separate those classes. But if we create a form or just have them take a notepad with them, and as they're in the classrooms, just take down a few notes, things, or even when they walk out of the room, jot down those notes from the classroom or points that we need to discuss, that we need to talk about. We're going to have that as evidence as well. And then our follow-up. I think we need more than, I personally don't like just doing a number, and even in observations, you know, I like the notes, and I think you're going to grow more from what they see and they hear and what they're writing down instead of just a rating.
Yeah, I agree. Scripting is captures more. They might even write down what the teacher says, something they observe students doing. So they can, and I think they're well versed from team observations and scripting and doing that sort of thing. So I think scripting would be great. Again, having some focus areas that we give them, but also collecting all the evidence that they see within that period of time. Yeah.
Are you gonna want them to walk in with the lesson, the curriculum, not just the lesson plan, but to compare, or will they do that with maybe take that back with their notes and compare to see how closely the teacher followed?
Well, I think they will have that in their scripting, so that if we gave that to them afterward, they could see.
And go back and sit.
I think afterward would be best. And let's see what's there. What do we see? And then kind of have some comparisons.
I think that goes back to the capacity building too.
Right.
Maybe having somebody sit with them and look at what did you script, what's in the curriculum, where do we see similarities, where do we see the teacher veered from the script, or and was that a beneficial move, or did it take away from or distract from? So that definitely goes to your capacity building purpose. You talked about, I think that's another question just to think about logistics. And this could be building to building, or it could be a district-wide decision around, you talked about Notepad or scripting that way, or there are some districts who choose to put those indicators in a Google form or in a form and do it. And then that way you can pull the data together.
We've discussed that in our instructional team meeting when we had our group together with technology of looking at how we could pull that into an electronic version. And then even if you want to take your iPad in, which I would like to script on the iPad, and then I have all my evidences. Some of our team may want to write on paper. I mean, I don't know, but I think if we have it in that Google form, we could print a copy for somebody and then put it back in if we need to. But I like the idea of having it on a Google form, and then we can have all of our responses pulled together.
That would give you some snapshots of data and how they're you're doing that. And it may be that, yeah, it could be you think through the things that you want to capture that way and the other things that may be okay for them to capture in a, in a different way, just in their notes. But what would be beneficial for you guys to have access to across?
Joshua's been working on some of that, Penny, and looking at how we could put that into the form. And he's created several samples that we might want to look at and see which one would work for our district and how we want to go
Using the
about
IPG.
Mhm. Electronically, and just different ways to separate it out so you have area for notes. And
Yeah.
he's been working on that some.
I saw one that he did for another county, but my initial thought was I really like the scripting for qualitative purposes. And then later, after it's arrived at these particular items that we agree on as a team, then that goes on the Google Doc. And then we're able to see trending school to school and within school.
We could have a collaborative sheet, and then each person that goes in will have an individual sheet. So we could pull all of our data together on a collaborative piece like you're talking about on that Google form. That would be ideal, I think, and being able to have all of our evidences and our feedback and our conversations in one spot.
Yeah, and I hear you want to make sure that you kind of all norm and all come to an agreement on what that data point is before you put it in the pool of tracking your progress at this point.
Right.
Yeah. So then the other questions that you've got data, you've got, so one of the questions would be, who will you share the data with? Will it be shared? And maybe that's different points along the way, different purposes for sharing. That would be, part of the other would be, what purpose would sharing, then what would that purpose be? I think that goes back to just your purpose for using it. If you're using it to help inform your implementation support, that may who would you share that data with? If you're doing it for teacher feedback, individual teachers, would you share individual teacher data? Maybe I'm thinking maybe even as you build out toward, long term, when you start to collect data for multiple core actions, may be different, and that may change along the way. I think just thinking ahead too, as part of your plan, and maybe as the rollout, thinking about for sharing with your school, your principals, who's going to have access to it, who is it going to be shared with, what are you going to use it for? Teachers probably also, they know you're collecting data. Kind of thinking through those things.
I think it would be important anytime you collect data that a teacher gets some sort of feedback from that. And I think even when we finish in the very beginning, if the principal could take back 2 or 3 pieces of feedback that would be beneficial for that teacher, just to let them know that and I think it should come from the principal and not really us going back, or it could be Mandy or,
I think the principal
Penny,
too.
but I think if the principal, after we've had our meeting and after we've all talked about things, giving them a few pieces to carry back to the teacher, so that teacher within a day or 2 would have something feedback. Hopefully one day, we wouldn't want to wait too long, but after we meet that next day, they could follow up. We enjoyed coming through your class. We loved seeing this. Ask questions. Maybe not, we don't want it to go toward the evaluative piece, but maybe some good questions the principal could ask if something was missing. We didn't notice using this part of our curriculum. Where is it? When do you do that? Just asking some questions and let that be our first initial feedback.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think because this is building capacity for the principal, that as a team we come together and arrive at some substantial feedback, and then that principal go back to the teacher and give some refinement, but then reinforcements to focus in on that first core action for sure. And that would build the principal capacity and also the capacity to continue on going throughout the year and doing that. And then you will be able to follow up with principals as a group in your monthly PLCs too. And so I think that's a great one.
I think the way we start and build this will determine the culture of the IPG, and we want it to be a positive culture and a learning experience, not an evaluation. And I said that a minute ago, but I think how we initially started will set the tone for that.
Yeah.
So I think if we start with, the reinforcements, like you're saying, and I wouldn't call them reinforcement and refinement because that makes them go immediately to team.
Right.
Just these are some things I really liked about the class, and I have a few questions. I don't want them to ever go toward team rubric.
Right.
I don't want that. Right now, I want them to look at it as a learning piece. And a growth
Go back to that
piece.
core action one.
Yes.
Is where we
Yes.
want to do them.
And then as we move through the different core actions, we'll have more feedback, and I think we'll have better feedback as over time, because we're going to learn, we're going to grow. Principals will have more feedback and let them kind of gauge that with the teacher led by the collaborative piece, like you said, coming together for a focus.
So you don't envision like giving a teacher maybe also stepping back from that team and evaluation field to give them a number or a rating. You're wanting the feedback to be more
Not starting out.
conversational,
Yes.
that your conversation, but it's through the lens of these indicators on the IPG.
I would rather do
Yes.
that.
And that's what we've said since summer, since we rolled it out, that it's more of a conversation. And in the area of giving and praising what they're doing well, and giving any feedback to help them grow even further. So yeah, that's what all the teachers have been told. All the principals are thinking as well. It's a conversation tool more than anything. So I like that. And actually, as we've gone to all the PLCs to discuss it individually with teachers, I've given them the quote that I borrowed from Barbara that comes from Alex Haley that says, "Find the good and praise it." And that's really what we want to do. We want to find what they're doing well and praise it and have them to continue doing that. If we see that there's an area that needs to be adjusted, we help them with that too, to see that through reflection, such as when the teacher left out that language portion. Do you feel like that students were not able to grow as much because of the language piece that was left out? Is that something we need to go back and hit on again? So it's that positive conversation and praising what they're doing well. And I love that we're focusing on that core action one, because here in the beginning of the year, it's really important that they follow that script to get the benefit and learn it. And then they can ease up with it if necessary, but it's still giving it with that integrity.
Yeah, it helps build, like you said, why, because they may not understand why this particular piece and why it's important for me to not leave that piece out at this point as they're just learning. And I also hear you talking a lot about building the culture of data for improvement versus data for accountability.
Right.
And that's a big culture shift. I think in a lot of districts are really trying to shift that mindset around data. And so I know that the work you've done already going into this is kind of setting the stage for that. But I think it is, you said this will set the tone, especially when you have groups of people coming in and then that there's something that's still a little intimidating about knowing that there's a group of people talking about my lesson and then somebody's going to come and give me some feedback. So just really kind of setting the tone for the purpose of that and that improvement piece, not only for them, but also you think you've got multi-levels here. You've got improvement for them and their delivery. You've got improvement for principals as they're learning the curriculum and learning, right along with them. You've got learning for district level because you guys are constantly looking to see where are we seeing places where we can help support you, in a different way, or, is there something that we hadn't thought of that, that might be revealing a trend, right? So that may be something that's revealing to you. So at all levels, it's all about improvement. It's not just about going in to give the teacher feedback. Teachers got to fix, but it's multi-levels. But I think you're right, and important in setting the stage and that tone for data for improvement and not for accountability in this space.
And I think in our conversations that we've had, it's more, I think the growth will come from our administrative teams and our instructional team and across all grade levels where we might not have had as much experience in the lower grades or in the upper grades, then we're going to be able to gain that knowledge. I know it will help me just going in, coming into this spot new, looking at the lower grades more. So I feel like really letting the teacher know you're helping me grow.
Right.
And that's kind of, what I wanted them to do. The principals are going in, you're helping me to grow.
Right.
They've had all the training on all of their curriculum and the Reading 360. I mean, 2 solid weeks. That's a lot of training that administrators have not had.
Right.
So I think they're helping us to learn what they've learned. And, we learn from one another. And I think that will be one of our key focuses as we go in. We're learning from each other, not a score.
Right.
We're learning and we're giving feedback and
Leaders as learners.
Yeah.
Right. And I love what you said too, a reminder that we want to know what we can do better to support them too in this process too. And so it's improvement for
That's that
leaders
mirror,
as
right?
well.
Right.
Yes.
And I had one of our instructional team mention in our meeting, and they had called me and when am I going to get to start learning more about the IPG? Because we'll go in some on our own just as a leadership team across the district and wanting to have that knowledge as well. That we will come back and share with our instructional team, which would cover all areas of our central office staff. So when we're looking at that team getting that knowledge as well, because they want to grow and learn. And I think, we'll bring that back to them from our principals and from our meetings.
Yeah.
And, I just see it. They're excited and they want to learn that, So
It is exciting.
It is.
I learn every time I go into the classroom more about the curriculum itself.
Right.
And I've said to teachers, you're the one teaching the curriculum, so we're learning from you.
So I think the next question is, we talked a lot about kind of setting the stage and the purpose. So I'm wondering if you just want to think about how will the purpose and expectations be communicated to principals and teachers, kind of like probably one of your next steps.
I think first is the meeting we had with principals, which we've already kind of laid the groundwork with principals, but following up again with them, having that meeting of when we come in, this is what you can expect to see. We also have tomorrow our instructional coaches. They're called learning leaders. We're meeting tomorrow 9 to 2. And part of that meeting tomorrow is dealing with the IPG and what to expect. So as they are the instructional coaches in the building, they'll take that to our teachers and let them know we're getting ready to start. This is coming. So it's kind of a tiered rollout. And I feel like that'll be enough. And especially after you've had all the meetings with the grade levels as well. I think they're
they
ready
anticipate
for
some
that.
of this
Yes.
is coming anyway.
They
So
do.
it's just a matter of kind of some of the logistics
They're
that we're
ready,
talking
and
about
we
here.
set the schedules and the dates
Mhm.
with our learning leaders and our principals. Learning leaders tomorrow, principals again will be coming up. I think it's the 28th, but we can do that sooner. Our next meeting.
Okay.
So we can do that in those meetings
Yeah.
and roll that out.
And we can sit down and come up with some dates.
Well,
to
you and
do
I
walkthroughs.
had talked about too, going to the principals and setting those dates up
Yes.
with them ahead of time.
Yes.
So if Penny and I go out
Yes.
and Mandy, then we can set those dates. I know we have upper grades already set for the 27th and 29th, getting them started. But in our lower grades, what we're doing here, we'll need to work around that one.
Yeah. Maybe we can start that this week, meeting with them. Or next week.
Well, yeah, next week, because tomorrow's learning later all day,
Yeah.
and then Friday. So this week's, we're almost done.
Yeah.
It was a 4-day week.
Yeah.
But definitely by Monday or Tuesday, Penny, we could start into that.
Okay.
Do your learning leaders need any additional support ahead of this? Do you think?
I think tomorrow we will have a good conversation about it and share with them again. They were in on the leaders, the administrative academy that we had this summer. So they got all that information. And then tomorrow will be a good conversation if they do need more clarification or whatever. And
They
just
went
us,
through the training too.
I
The
was going to say,
summer.
did they go?
They did.
Yes,
All of
they
our
did.
learning leaders had the Reading 360 and the
right,
2-week training.
right.
Are they going to be, do you see them kind of on the same trajectory as your principals? With focusing on correction one, with administrators kind of being on that same track?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think through this process, one question I want to think too, because we talked about the mirror also of just your support. So what do you guys individually or maybe collectively want to be sure to focus on and do really well through this process to be attentive to how you approach?
For me, it again is praising the good and helping them to replicate that, to continue doing what they're doing well, and to fine tune any areas, help them to reflect on what areas to refine as it comes to implementing the curriculum with integrity so that all students can achieve. I think that's a big goal there.
And I think too, being able to share some of the strengths that we're seeing with other schools once we have that down, so it can kind of raise the expectations across the board. If they see one teacher is able to do this, oh, I can do that. You know, I think just growing across the district, getting more consistency with our high flyers, you might say, being able to share some of those things when the time's appropriate, just a shout out here or principals with that, being able to share some of the positive things they're seeing and sharing it with other principals. I think we'll see that begin to grow because they'll want to rise to those expectations as well. So I think that would be one thing I want to see as a district, and with me just growing in the knowledge of our new curriculum. You know, I really want to be able to get into those classrooms and spend more time in there and with the teachers. And sometimes that's hard to do, you know.
So you want to prioritize
everything.
Getting
So
in.
to me, that's what I want to spend that time in the rooms.
Yeah.
I think that will help me more than anything.
Yes. And I'm very excited about all the pieces we have in place. I've said this repeatedly, but I truly believe it to be the best year ever because of the Reading 360 training. We have the teacher advocacy there. And we're applying that now because teachers have the instructional materials that they need. And in the lower grades, we have the Sounds First activities to add to the units. And across the board, all grade levels have high quality instructional materials like we've not had before ever in ELA. And then we have the stakeholders. We have principals who are ready to help. We have coaching support. It's just all there. So I really feel like this is our year to grow. And I'm totally excited about the place we are now to move forward.
And I think too, looking at, you know, with the time to grow is now, and we see the urgency of that after last year. And, you know, we're inundated with what we've lost. And now we want to go from there and move forward and make sure that we can close those gaps for all children. And our principals are ready. They're ready to do that. We have that focus on instruction and what good instruction looks like, and being able to track that across schools and from teacher to teacher, being able to track that data more consistently, which we didn't have an opportunity to do last year. I think it's going to make a big difference, and we are ready. I mean, they're hungry for it. They're ready to make a change and get it where it needs to be. You know, after having a year of so many disruptions, we're ready to focus in on this instruction.
I think a lot of great things to celebrate, but you both talked about really leaning into celebrating and making sure that you prioritize lifting up those all the great things that are happening, because I think sometimes we can get stuck in the, you know, in that refinement space, and it feels like we're constantly you know, asking to do more. We know that like you said, teachers have had through the training this summer, but also what you guys have given them in leading up to this year, and the materials and the support and structures. You've got Mandy, you've got, your principals, you've built that culture, you've got a lot of things kind of, but really leaning into, both of you talked about leaning into this, celebrating the positive things and highlighting those and letting that be a driver, but then also using the IPG, which would be another purpose would be to just to monitor and show the growth as they move through this year too. So
Yeah, I think that will help teachers to sustain the first part of this semester, because sometimes it gets weary, it gets hard, but we want to help them to push through to the end and see the outcomes that kids will have because of it. So it's like Pam said, we have, as a district, we have high expectations, but we also want that support there so that they can reach that. And so it needs to be ongoing throughout the year. Our support does.
That's exciting stuff. So has this conversation been helpful? Is there anything else that we want to talk through? You feel good about your direction, next steps?
Yes, I do. You've answered all the questions I had.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're ready now to just plan our next steps and go forward. So appreciate the time.
Yeah, you've got your learning leaders here tomorrow. So I think that's probably and getting schedules.
Yes.
Trying to think back to a lot of the things you lifted up there. Principals, circling back to those, and then getting them on your calendar. Sounds like pretty soon, right? Yes. Yes. And then I think we talked about before too that I'd love to join in some of those at some point, and maybe it's not the first round, maybe it's the second round once you kind of get things worked out. If that probably feels a little more comfortable with your folks, but partly again, not just learning on our side too, to see how does it translate. We want to learn too with this tool because it's not been used widely, and it's just kind of floating out there now. But in thinking about, especially in your building capacity with your principals, that space there is thinking about what pieces are tricky or are confusing or are, and are there things that we can kind of anticipate and think about how to support that on a larger scale too through our ELA consultants across the state as well. So not only just kind of getting into classrooms and seeing because we can talk all day long,
Right.
but it's that like getting in and actually using the tool and seeing what we see in real life with real kids and real teachers in real time, and taking any kind of learning opportunities we can from that, just as our ELA group.
I'm glad to hear you say that too, because I think so many times things are created and it's, okay, this is it. This is the end all be all. But until you really get out and use a tool, it's hard to know exactly what needs to be tweaked or if all pieces are as they should be.
Right.
So I'm glad to hear you say that, and that, we can be involved in that as well to, make it a tool that is going to be very beneficial. And I mean, it looks great on the surface right now, but like you say, until you go out and use it, you won't realize little things that may be missing. So.
And it has that school-based perspective, really, so that it helps principals, helps teachers.
Because we want it, we talked about it can serve multiple purposes, but, we want it has to be able to translate into improving at the student and teacher level. It has to. If it doesn't, then it's conversations at,
it's not worth the time.
At district level, we can talk all day. Yeah. And I know we were able to get into a few classes back in the spring and kind of did a similar thing just to kind of see, and you just know with this tool, with the knowledge building tool, it's every time you come out of a classroom, you might see a scenario and you think, well, how do we address that particular thing, because it's a little bit different, or the nuances in that. And so I think that's part of this process here too with us is that we can kind of work through some of those and maybe help inform any of those spaces that feel out of line or missing something, or resources that can kind of come in and support, or all those kinds of things. So,
Happy to do that.
for y'all.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's been good. Okay.
Thank you. I think I can, let me see. I guess I don't know, have to hang up. Let me see if I can, oh, there we go. Stop recording.